It's been over a week since Frank Reich's introductory press conference. Now we get to talk about, is he the right man for the job? Hey, Panther fans, we're back. Yes, we were a little later this week. Life got in the way, but we're back and we're ready to rock and roll. How you doing, kiddo?
Doing good, man. Ready to get back to it.
All right.
Talk some more
So,
Panthers football.
oh man, you have to. And this is a good week to do it. So, as you saw at the top of the show, our episode today is Frank Reich, the right man for the job. And we also wanted to kind of talk about what are the things he's going to have to do to avoid suffering the same fate as one Matt Rhule. So, you ready to get going, man?
Let's do it.
All right. So it's been a little over a week, I think 9 days exactly, since we had our Frank Reich introductory press conference. And I know Panther Nation still on the fence about the move, but rest assured, Steve Wilkes did land on his feet. You saw that earlier this week, Takari?
Yeah, I did. He he just got hired by the 49ers for the defensive coordinator position. I saw them nothing more than that.
I think that's a good spot for him. What do you think?
I like it. He's not D'Amico Ryans, but um, I mean it's a great opportunity. It's definitely from his natural defensive defensive backs position going up into a bigger role in the defensive coordinator position. I think it's definitely a big step up, and that was the number one defense in the league. So I mean, it's an easy job to step into and be successful. And who knows, maybe that could turn into a head coaching job after this 2023-24 season.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he more than landed on his feet. I mean, I would say that defensive coordinator's job is probably the most coveted of all the DC job openings in the league because that Shanahan system has turned out quite a few coaches, especially on the defensive side of the ball, because you end up with Robert Saleh and I believe Mike McDaniel is from that same tree as well. So Steve Wilkes plays his cards right, stays here for a couple years, gets elevated to a head coach. San Francisco gets that compensatory draft pick because I know that's why they do it. So it looks like it's going to work out for all sides. And I think at the end of the day, this was the best thing that could have happened for the Panthers and for Steve Wilkes. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. Not a lot of Panthers fans, I think, right now. I think we're kind of both ways, but I think it works out for both parties. And like I mentioned before, I think that's a great position to go into and already have that talent. And you got Kyle Shanahan already calling the plays on offense, so it's less for him to worry about. So I mean, I think it's a great opportunity for Steve Wilkes.
Oh, definitely, definitely, and it's a step up from what he was doing with the Carolina Panthers because his job when he was brought on last year was he was the defensive passing game coordinator, which sounds like a really made up title to get some veteran presence on your team. But I get it. Listen, Matt Rhule, and we will cover this a little bit later, but Matt Rhule definitely did not go for veteran NFL experience when he first constructed his staff the previous year. So and I think that's going to lead right into what we wanted to cover because right now we were looking at some of the national perspective stuff, and I'm hard pressed to find anybody who is upset about, or I wouldn't say upset, but who thinks that it's a bad move to bring Frank Reich on as our head coach. I was actually watching an interview with ESPN, and Dan Orlovsky actually said that he had picked the Carolina Panthers prior to all this stuff to win the division, and we were one game out from winning it. But he really does believe the Frank Reich move is the right move, and it will propel us to a division title, and he'll be keeping a sharp eye out for us. What have you been seeing out there?
I haven't seen too much, but I agree with Dan Orlovsky. I think that with this roster, it's been slowly in the works of like getting better and better and elevating. I think through the years of the draft, building up young talent. I mean, they're set up to take over the South if they it's the ball's in their hands. It's up to them. And you bring in a guy like Frank Reich. I mean, you got to go out and ball.
I
But
couldn't agree more, man. I couldn't agree more. So rolling right into, has Panther Nation beginning to soften on Frank Reich a little bit? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm super active on a lot of boards, fan boards, and man, our fan base almost as a whole, and I don't want to say that, straight away, but I'm sure there's a lot of Panther fans out there that feel the way we do, but people were really banking on Steve Wilkes becoming the next head coach of the Carolina Panthers. And looking at a lot of the fan boards, a lot of the fans were up in arms that he wasn't given the position. I really did believe David Tepper when he said in the press conference following Matt Rhule's firing that Steve Wilkes will have to do an incredible job to be considered for the job of head coach of the Panthers the following season. And I really do believe that he stood by his word. I also am not a big fan of that this was another instance of a black coach not getting an opportunity. Hate to go with the controversial topic straight away, but might as well hit the elephant in the room. So I think from the outset that David Tepper was very adamant about who and what he wanted to bring on. And if you look across the interviews, it was OC, 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 you know, and it was, I mean, you're talking from Jim Caldwell, they had interest in, I mean, well, Jim Harbaugh had interest in us, but I think he was trying to leverage us for a big payday with Denver. But I mean, Shane Steichen, and then there was Ben Johnson from the Lions. I mean, you're talking OC after OC, and really the only DC that we really talked to was Steve Wilkes. We did try to set up with D'Amico Ryans, but that didn't end up happening. So, have you? I mean, I know you're on the boards as well. Have you seen any change of heart in the Panthers fan base?
I think it's been fairly quiet, but I still think it's still towards Steve Wilkes right now. I think people are kind of concerned and they don't know too much about Frank Reich. For
Yeah,
those who don't watch too much of Colts football or any of that AFC division, so people are concerned. They have questions. Oh, sorry, Holly, go way down, go way down, go way down. Sorry,
I believe that's Dakari's
go way
dog.
down, go way down. She like
So,
scampering around.
yeah, no, you're good.
Um, but to what I was saying, I think it's a big question mark, and I think and people are going to be uneasy and unsettled until they see what Frank Reich is about, how he's going to manage the game, how he's going to coach these players and elevate them, win over that locker room that Steve Wilkes did, because like you had mentioned earlier, everyone was ready to go to bat for Steve Wilkes. So
Absolutely. I mean, you had Panther alumni, Panther players. I mean, they were putting out public statements in support of Steve Wilkes. Now, the one thing that did get me is, did you see the outcry by Skip Bayless on Undisputed with Skip and Shannon, where he's like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Carolina Panthers locker room doesn't boycott because they're upset that Steve Wilkes didn't get the job. Did you see that?
I didn't, but that sounds like a Skip Bayless thing to say.
He's
He's
wild.
got some outlandish things to say. Yeah,
He's wild. I just don't want to lose the perspective that these are professionals. These are professional athletes that are making some really good money to play a sport as a living. I don't know that I'd ever see a situation where the Carolina Panthers locker room would revolt against Frank Reich, because I think at the end of the day, I believe winning cures all. If Frank brings the wins, I think that's going to fix everything. I don't think anybody's going to remember being in this weird spot where people are, you know, on the fence. And there's a couple people that I listen to that say two things can be true, right? You can really feel disappointed that Steve Wilkes didn't get the job. I wouldn't even say that he was screwed over. Like I really don't even want to go there, because he did a fair job. And you can also feel happy and hopeful that Frank Reich was the choice. I believe both are true, and I don't think you have to choose one over the other. How what do you think?
no, I agree absolutely. And to your point, I think like David Tepper's expectations were, if listen, like you don't have too much experience at the head coaching job, and if you're going to be the face of the future going forward, I think in his eyes, we need to make the playoffs and we need to make a deep playoff push. I think, and if that wasn't going to happen, then I don't even think his name was in competition for that head coaching spot. I think that was the expectation in
Yeah,
David Tepper's eyes
yeah, I
for
agree.
him to be the HC.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, I'm with you. I think that was always the plan. Now, I want to start getting into a little bit of the things that, what does Frank Reich have to do to prevent from being, having the same fate as Matt Rhule? And I'm going to go after the low hanging fruit because I think this is what you and I really talked about when we started seeing Matt Rhule's staff get put together. Now, there was an audio clip from Frank Reich sit down with Kirsten Balboni before his introductory press conference, but after he was initially announced as a hire, that the chosen head coach for the Carolina Panthers. In that interview, she's asking him about his theory and his philosophy, and he said, "You know, I'm a football coach, and I really do believe that you have to bring on complementary coaches and not just bringing in your buddies." Do you think Frank was throwing some shade at Matt Rhule?
Uh, Absolutely. Even when I just hear that story, 100%. And that is the role of the head coach. You get to bring in your own staff, your own people,
Yeah,
and for people who have know Matt Rhule and the his time in Carolina, he was bringing in a lot of his staff were former coaches. He coached with at Baylor, at Temple. He
Phil
even brought
Snow.
in guys from Temple,
Yeah,
players wise.
yeah.
Phil Snow.
Jeff
Um,
Nixon. I mean, he loaded that roster with a lot of, especially that first year, he loaded that roster with a lot of non NFL coaches, and I think you and I talked about this. I we didn't believe it in it when we first saw it. We were actually really concerned. It's like, this guy has 1 year of experience in the Tom Coughlin regime as an assistant offensive line coach, and he's not bringing on any NFL talent. He brought in the pass game coordinator from LSU to be the OC. And I think we kind of figured out what drove that LSU offense. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase,
I didn't I
Justin
didn't like that move
Jefferson.
at all.
No, it was scary. And I think we were getting a little breadcrumbs about it when Teddy Bridgewater left town. You remember when he left town and he's like, he got to Denver, I believe, but he did an interview, like a players only interview, and he talked about how he was super concerned because they didn't run a 2 minute period. And I think Panther Nation as a whole were like, "Oh, you're just salty because you're not a Panther anymore." And I think the truth came out. I think the truth ended up being that without a veteran NFL staff, you're going to be missing out on some things. What do you think?
Absolutely, 100%, and that's what comes with bringing in guys that haven't coached in the next level.
Yeah,
You don't know how to prepare grown men to get ready to go to battle, and on Sundays, it's a lot of it. The game is so much more different from college to the NFL, and these coaches, you need time, you need experience. It's very rarely that you have a coach that comes up from the college level with no NFL experience and has immediate success. And it came and bit Matt Rhule and that whole operation in the butt.
it literally did. So obviously, we get the first 5-win season, and then he fired Joe Brady along with bringing on Cam Newton. There's all that craziness, and he elevated Jeff Nixon to OC for the final few games of that season. And then the offseason, that's when he really started to bring in some NFL coaches. Obviously, he brought in Ben McAdoo as OC. He brought in Steve Wilks as the defensive pass game coordinator. Chris Tabor, special teams coordinator, not an NFL head coach, but NFL pedigree. He brought in James Campen, offensive line. So he started bringing in that NFL talent. But I think the problem is the other thing that bit him in the butt is he never addressed the quarterback position. Now, conversely, now we're starting to see Frank Reich put together his staff, and what are you seeing with that so far?
I'm seeing a vast improvement. I mean, I'm liking the moves. I mean, to what we were just talking about was connections. It's you're hiring the right guy for the job, not like a buddy, so
Right,
to say.
right.
And I don't know if we got into it already. I don't know how to pronounce his
Ejiro Evero. I had to work on
Zero Evero,
it.
but not a promotion, but he steps over from Denver, and
Yep.
I think we had seen something about they were upset to see him go.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good move. I think they ranked pretty well. I mean, I'll let you get into that, but I know
There you
he
go.
did a very fair job over in Denver with that talent over there.
Yeah, no, this is actually a very exciting hire. I'll be honest with you. When I saw it come in, I had to like blink twice because if you remember, Ejiro Evero was actually brought in as one of our potential head coaching candidates. And to see him be hired as part of this regime tells me that David Tepper is learning his lesson. He's learning a very valuable lesson. And the one thing I'll tell you is that as a Panthers fan, we're used to losing out on the big name player free agents and coaching free agents. And so Ejiro Evero was also due to go visit Minnesota. And Ajiro Evero also has ties with the LA Rams. There was a lot of moving parts and pieces that didn't feel like we would actually have a chance at snagging him. And the reason why this is important is the stat that I wanted to go over was the DVOA, which Denver was 10th in total DVOA in 2020-22. So they were the top third of the league. I mean, that's huge. Carolina was 25th. And as good as, and as much as people say positive things about our defense, with our offense being so inefficient, our defense got worn down most games. And although we looked good early on, I mean, by the end of the game, we were giving up crazy amounts of yards. And I like the DVOA number is because it weighs in things like, strength of schedule, time of game where the yards are starting to rack up, so you're not getting unfairly penalized for plays at the end of a game where it's essentially it's over. They're just throwing things against the wall, and so I mean, for him to lead a group to a 10th in the league, that's a testament. Now, the thing that really kind of gets me is that he didn't even make it to Minnesota. We had the offer in hand. He accepted it before he even went to Minnesota, which tells me David Tepper is intent on keeping his word to Frank Reich, because that's one of the things that Frank Reich said during one of his interviews is that Mr. Tepper has promised him that he's going to do anything and everything to build the best coaching staff out there. So that is step one, and I'm actually feeling, pretty happy about that. Now, moving on is that we've already brought on a linebackers coach, and that's somebody who worked for Ajiro Evero in Denver, and it's Peter Hansen. And Peter Hansen's actually, he's got some decent coaching chops. He's 43 years old, and he played football and basketball at the University of Arizona. And he also was the defensive coordinator in Arizona for 2 seasons before joining Ajiro Evero with the Broncos. So again, it's a gentleman that really knows what he's doing. And also, if you know, Ajiro Evero is a big fan of the 3-4. Now, Carolina runs a 4-3 base with a lot of moving parts and pieces. So the 3-4 is a little bit different style of defense. And my hope is that we eventually do transition over, but I hope it's not something that we just try to make work. Do you think, how do you think they're going to try to employ the 3-4 over the course of this next year, Dakari?
I think they'll work it in slow. I think that's a great idea. And when you think about the 3-4 and you think about bringing in another backer or nickel, you got to think about one of my favorite linebackers on the roster that we don't talk about enough is Brandon Smith. And he
That
didn't he
man,
didn't get nearly enough reps that he should have
he
this
looks
year.
like a
And
Greek god. He really does.
with his wingspan, his speed, and he's very young. I think he was just getting a grasp of the league and
Yeah.
just the schemes and plays and everything. But I think once he's sharpened up and with the right coaching, with the new coaching, I think he's going to be a force. And I think 3-4 would be great. I mean, you got him, Luvu, Shaq's getting up there in age. So, I mean, I would like to see the development of Brandon Smith. So,
Yeah, no, and that's the thing with the 3-4. I think we would have to address two things quickly. Who are we going to get as a true nose tackle? And how are we going to bolster that linebacker room? Because right now, Jeremy Chin has kind of played the hybrid. Matt Rhule, year one, he was like a hybrid. He played, more snaps at linebacker than he did at secondary. Last year, they tried to kick him back to secondary, and it just wasn't as productive of a season. And plus, he did have some games where he was injured. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with this defense, how they're going to transition over as we hit things like free agency and the draft and potential trades as well. Now, two things I think the Panthers did that was super smart is we retained Chris Tabor, who ran the special teams, and he was ranked. The Panthers special teams was actually ranked fourth in the entire NFL this season, and that was impressive. And I think it's a smart move to keep some continuity on that staff. Also, the other position group, or I think the position group that had the biggest turnaround from year one, Matt Rhule, to year two, year one and two, Matt Rhule, to year three, was the offensive line. We were god awful over the first couple years of Matt Rhule's reign. Like, just
a vast improvement.
bad. And then this past year, you add on Ike Ekwonu, you add on Bradley Bozeman, you add on Austin Corbett. You know, Taylor Moton didn't have as productive of a season, but he didn't have to because every piece of that offensive line was so much better than the previous year. So I'm left super happy about, you know, where we are with that. Now, what was you know, any additional feedback on the offensive line play? I mean, actually, you know, even just the retention of the coaches that we kept.
I think keeping the our OC, our offensive line coach James Campen, is a huge move. I think I talked about it in the last episode, but just bringing that back, having the same coach, you kind of get right back on the train, and it's a great thing to build off of. If you have the same coach like that, I'm glad that they kept him along, and it wasn't one of those like relationship things. It was like, okay, this is the guy for the job. He coached a very good team, and he got Ikem Ekwonu, elevated his game, his play,
Very much.
just vast improvement all around the board. So I like the move
Oh, I
to
think it's
keep him,
huge. I think it's
and
huge.
it's Panthers fans should definitely be excited about this offensive line because that's been a problem since for a few years now since our we lost a lot of our other vets during our Cam Newton days. So
Yeah, yeah, that was tough. That was tough. Some guys I'm not upset to see go, Mike Rimmer. But we're not gonna throw shade. Um, so next up, the one thing that Matt Rhule could not bring because he didn't have it was experience. So with Frank Reich, he's got NFL head coaching experience from the Indianapolis Colts, and not just any experience. This man is 7 games over 500. He's 40, 33, and 1 over his time as head coach with the Indianapolis Colts. And he's a Super Bowl winning OC for the Eagles. And I know people are like, you know, was Doug Peterson calling the offense or was Frank Reich calling the offense? And if you ask me, I think it was a collaborative effort. I honestly think that you're looking at probably like an Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy situation where I don't think Frank Reich was just a flower, a wallflower. I mean, he was definitely doing play calling in Indy, and Indy had some productive seasons even after Andrew Luck retired. So, like again, he brings play calling. Matt Rhule is like, I'm a CEO. I'm not better at one side of the ball than the other, and we're all sitting there going, what? What does that mean? So like that warms me. I mean, Frank Reich is a 14-year veteran of the NFL as a player. You know, he orchestrated one of the greatest comebacks of in playoff history when the Bills came back and beat the Houston Oilers. And like, you know, it's there, you can't replace those big moments. And you know, he has that experience, and Matt Rhule just didn't have it. And then he's had a 17-year career as a coach. So, I mean, in the league. So, I mean, you're talking like apples and oranges. I mean, you're going to get an entirely different experience. A guy that just looks and that I guarantee you that locker room is going to look and feel and operate different. Now, what do you think about the difference in experience between Frank Reich and Matt Rhule?
that's a huge difference. And you why else would Matt Rule refrain back to a college program? It's experience.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to bring. I actually, I have a article that I pulled up, and it kills me because Matt Rule was asked on a podcast about, you know, his time with, you know, being in the NFL. And he said, you know, was it like they asked him, was it a mistake that he went to? So here's Matt Rule's response, and I'm going to read it, and I want you to respond. He goes, "My whole life, from a very young age, I wanted to be a Division I college football coach. Had a great experience with the Giants as an assistant O-line coach. So when the chance came to be an NFL head coach, I went for it, and I did it. But I'm wired for this. I'm wired for this age group, these kids, for the recruiting. And you know what? I love Saturdays. I love the bands. I love the student sections. I love everything. When I was in the NFL, I would spend most of my Saturdays watching college football. It's kind of a different game, and it kept me thinking. It kept me, and I think I'm prepared to come back. I'm ready. I'm really happy to be back. I'm sorry. I kind of got myself all twisted up in there because I was kind of laughing while I was reading that. But feedback on what I just read, please.
I mean, have fun, enjoy it.
Don't let the door hit you with the good Lord split you.
Yeah.
Enjoy
quite
Nebraska.
literally. Oh my gosh.
Like, I mean, ah, man, I mean, I David Tepper, I think we talked about it before. David Tepper's comments about, the mistake of hiring Matt Rhule, like, or a coach like Matt Rhule. I'm sorry, Matt, if you ever would watch this podcast, but I think we are all better after this experience, better as fans. I think Tepper's better owner, Matt Rhule. Bye. So yeah. Now, something that plagued Frank Reich as well as Matt Rhule. So I can't say that there's a huge difference, but I think he got more out of the position, is the quarterback position. So in Indianapolis, Frank Reich had Andrew Luck for 1 year, retired on him going into preseason of the following season. He had Jacoby Brissett play that following season. Then he went and got Phillip Rivers, then Carson Wentz, and then Matt Ryan. And overall, like I said, he had a decent record with a quarterback carousel. Here in Carolina, it hasn't been so pretty, and we definitely didn't bolster names as big as Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan. But again, by the time Phillip Rivers actually had a pretty productive year, Matt Ryan looked like a mess. But in Carolina, since Cam Newton, we had Cam, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke was in there. Then obviously we went and got Teddy Bridgewater. Then we went and got Sam Darnold. Then Cam Newton version 2. Then at some point Jacob Eason, and then Baker Mayfield, and then Sam Darnold and PJ Walker. And even with all those names, we still didn't end up with a better record over a similar period of time as Frank Reich. So what do you think Frank's best opportunity to be successful in role around the quarterback room is? What do you think he should do?
I think I think we gotta I think it's important to have veteran presence in that quarterback room, but also to Scott Fitterer's point, to build a guy homegrown, draft a guy and build
Amen.
him up. Um, so you have that veteran presence in the locker room to help you get up to speed, but you also have the new head coach and he gets a choice of his quarterback. And being a former quarterback, having a connection, you kind of connect with that quarterback in certain ways that maybe other coaches, a defensive coordinator that goes to head coach, can't connect to a quarterback. So it could be a special connection, and you have like a healthy quarterback room where you can have a guy like a veteran maybe come in, or if there's an injury by chance, but mainly just like having a presence, building, having good energy in that room. But
I
I think
like it.
that's where he's got to start.
That's a great plan, because like my whole piece on this is he has to fix the quarterback room. Now, do we do it through free agency? Because right now, going into free agency again, these are just today's players. The reasonable targets, and I went through the free agent list for guys whose contracts are expiring going into the offseason. Daniel Jones, Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy Garoppolo, Geno Smith, Lamar Jackson to me is a stretch. I don't think that's ever going to work out. Teddy Bridgewater is a stretch. I don't think that's ever going to work out. I can see going into free agency and grabbing a vet, but I'm like, is that vet better than who you have on the roster? Do you see if you can retain Sam to be that veteran presence while you bring somebody along, or are you just completely done with the Sam Darnold project? My jury's still out on that one. So, or do you trade for a guy? Because we have some guys that are looking to be traded. On that list, we got Aaron Rodgers, who's currently in the midst of his 4-day sabbatical in a purely dark room with 2 meals. Man, is he weird. Derek Carr, who was at the Pro Bowl and throwing shade at the Raiders, saying that's why he's getting ready to leave. Trey Lance is a little bit of a long shot trade. I don't like it. There's just not enough tape for me to want to give up assets for him. And Zach Wilson, absolutely not. Like, there's no reason I would ever want to do that. So I went through that list. Anything that pokes out to you between free agency and trading for a guy?
Yeah, looking at this list, I like bringing in a veteran presence like Jacoby Brissett.
Mm, I could
I
see that.
think Cleveland really embraced him in
Yep.
his role when Deshaun Watson was suspended, and
Yeah.
he really got that locker room behind him. So I
Yeah.
would really like to see a guy like that. Or trade scenario, looking at the list, I would say Derek Carr,
Yeah.
realistically.
That's
Um,
the only guy on that list that I would even want to take a shot on. Now we
yeah.
get to the fun part. Or do you draft a QB? Because I hear there's a few guys that are coming out from college that might fit the bill for Carolina. Now, again, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but let's do a quick synopsis of who we have here. Now, does Carolina make a move to go to the top of the draft and trade with Chicago and grab like a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, or do you make a mid move and trade to with fifth, with Seattle and grab like a Will Levis, or do you stay put? And which I think you're going to be prime place for Anthony Richardson, or is that too much of a stretch? What do you see as the best option here?
Yeah, so I mean, I know we'll probably have like a deeper in-game draft prospect episode.
No, we will.
I won't get too much into it, but I know I think realistically we can draft up like a couple, like one of two options is we trade up and we get a guy like CJ Stroud or Bryce Young at 3. Or if you're feeling really good about um the tr- the the scouting process, and Anthony Richards' ceiling, you take a chance and wait and pick him at 9 because I'm sure Anthony Richardson could drop to 9. So,
I mean, I think
couple
that
options.
yeah, I think he'll definitely drop at least to 9. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. Like, again, I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this because we are going to have a full draft episode where it may be an hour long show where we just kind of just go through the draft. So next, well, Frank Reich is already coming in with a better offensive line than Matt Rhule boasted in his first season. But what do we need to do to stay on that path? And I've kind of outlined a couple of points here. So Austin Corbett, in his own interview, said, they asked him like, what happened. He's like, the one thing you don't want to happen week 18 of a season, and it turned out to be true. He tore his ACL. All the reports are saying that he's healing just fine, but I mean, it's a stretch to think that Corbett's going to be ready for the opening of the season, and you got to think he's going to miss all the OTAs. He's going to miss all the summer workouts, and then going into the camp season. I think that's just a lot to ask. So I think you're going to already be behind the 8 ball looking for a guard to take his place. Now, Brady Christensen, I'm not super worried about. It was an ankle break. I think that's going to heal up decently, and he should be ready to go for OTAs, or at least the phase 2 of OTAs if he's not immediately available. So, what do you think of Cade Mays? A little bit slight of frame, but I mean, obviously a physical presence. Do you think Cade Mays will fit in with that in that guard spot, or do you think we really need to go out and do our due diligence and grab another guy?
I think for depth reasoning, I think we definitely should get a guy to
Yeah,
fill in that spot. But for the time being, Cade Mays does have a year under his belt. He played some solid, pretty mediocre, solid play. Didn't really stand out, but I mean
right.
it's a fill-in spot until Corbett comes back, and you definitely want to look to get depth.
Yeah,
But
no,
I wouldn't see that being until like later in the draft, like after the 5th round or so.
or something that could be you could address through free agency. Just get a guy that can really suit the
Sure,
bill. And then again, we'll have an entire free agency episode where we're going over contracts and what the Panthers are likely to do to try to free up some cap room. So stay tuned for that. That's where I go nuts. That's my analytical mind taking over. I can't even wait for that. So what does Icky have to do to avoid that venomous sophomore slump, sir?
just keep growing. There's really not too much to it. You gotta, I mean, like any other player, you just gotta keep working in the off season, stay consistent. I mean, just go through your technique, and I mean, he played pretty well. I'm honestly not too worried about Ikem Ekwonu, but to have a sophomore
I'm with
slump,
you.
you wanna,
I
you,
don't think I don't think he's going to be subject to sophomore slump. I think the biggest thing is continuity, and they're bringing back James Campen. I think that would have been the thing I would have worried about if he had to go through, learn another guy's system and another guy's technique. I think Ikiem is going to continue to grow. Defensively, Phil Snow didn't do bad, right? I mean, I think the run game was god awful. The third quarter defense was like historically bad. Like we couldn't put points up and we couldn't stop players in the Matt Rule era. I think as you begin to transition to this 3-4, you got to address it through personnel. You got to make sure you're putting the right people in the right places. And I think they're smart enough not to send us into this crazy tailspin, because I know Ron Rivera is a kind of a knee-jerk move, try to switch us to a 3-4 in his last season with us, and it was just a bad look. And then Minnesota did the same thing. They tried to snap switch to a 3-4 over the, and I'm pretty sure Ejiro Evero is a pretty smart guy. He's not going to put us in a position. And plus, I mean, it means a lot to him. This guy was in the coaching cycle as a potential head coaching candidate. I'm pretty sure he's going to put himself in a position where he's not going to sacrifice all that hard work and potentially, you know, have himself on the outside looking in the next coaching cycle. So defensively, I mean, I know it's kind of off the cuff, but what do you think Frank Reich can do to address, you know, personnel wise? What can we do to make sure that we continue to grow this unit that is considered a really good unit?
You speaking about the offensive line?
The defense. I'm sorry, our defense.
Oh, defense. Okay, defense. I think priority number one of two is help Brian Burns and to also help J.C. Horn. You found your
Oh
cornerback
man,
one and your DN one,
yeah.
but JC needs help.
CJ ain't it. CJ ain't it. Like,
No,
he's not it. Like, not even a little bit it. And
no,
JC does need
no.
help. JC's a guy.
No, yeah, no, he is the guy. I wouldn't feel too confident, Panthers fans, about CJ Henderson. He's got solid technique. I mean, he's in on some of the plays, but sometimes he can get a little lackluster and caught sleeping sometimes. And really, he's a liability on deep plays. I think if you go and look at statistics, anytime that there was a deep ball to CJ Henderson, or if you even go back and just watch the games, like just killer plays where it's just like he's pulling the dude down and the ball's not even there yet, or
Like, it
he's
just
not even looking up at the
he's
ball.
beat.
Just,
He know he's beat. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna have to make a business
oh
decision here.
man,
We're gonna have to get
oh
these penalty
man,
yards.
the worst business decision. So I would definitely say help JC Horn because
Yeah,
JC is your guy, right? We're thinking about
yeah,
that.
yeah.
You you get another guy. Dante Jackson's going to kind of be working his way back in slow, so you need
Yeah,
to bring another young talent in to help JC out and really lock down that, really secure that D's Avenue again and lock that down. And
it would be
I
nice
think
to
the
see that
biggest
make a
thing,
comeback.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I'm hoping for it. And the biggest thing, I think this is priority numero uno, and this is the two-time Pro Bowler we have here, the only Pro Bowler on the Panthers team, arguably the best player on this team. You got to get him some help, and I know he was
Spidey
very
Burns.
confident. Spidey Burns, I know he was very confident. He spoke very highly of Utor in training camp, and obviously he's saying we're good
Yeah.
over on that side because I know they asked him about it. But he
YGM's
needs
not
he
it.
needs no, and you need a Hassan Reddick presence. You need a guy who's going to be in your face
Yeah.
and threatening the pass rush almost every play.
Oh, agreed.
And
Agreed.
he definitely could use the help. So
So my pick is we got to identify a man in the middle. Like, we haven't had that position since Luke August Kuechly, man. We haven't had the man in the middle, the general commanding the defense. And I know Frankie Louvu, man, he's playing above himself, man. But I think Frankie Louvu is a complementary piece. You still need a man in the middle, a guy that knows what he's doing and that's commanding that defense. I like Shaq. Shaq's obviously a veteran. His contract is ballooning though, and we have to make a decision here if we're going to restructure his contract. Because if he's a pre-June cut, and I got to go look at that date, we actually end up with about like 11 or 12 million in dead money, but we free up 14 million in cap room. So all of a sudden we go from -9, because we're over the cap by like 9 million. We go over the cap by 4. So we've got to address Shaq's contract. You can't pay Shaq, that kind of money. You can't pay him $24 million this season. So there's got to be some hard decisions there. And we do, and I'm hoping, because of linebacker depth, I'm worried. I hope we can work something out, because I don't want to have to go look for a bunch of linebackers. I mean, get Shaq back under a reasonable contract, team friendly, and then let's go start to identify the next guy, the next man in the middle, the next captain, because I mean, it's just so important. It's such an important spot that they identify the lanes, right? We haven't had that since Luke, man. They haven't had a consistent presence since Luke. So those are my two keys on defense of how we can make sure that Frank can keep himself from befalling the same fate as Matt Rhule. So what does success look like for Frank Reich, Dakari? Division
Playoffs.
title, playoff berth, winning record is can he have a successful run the first season without making playoffs? Would that fly?
No,
I don't think so either. I don't think so either.
because when was the last time we got in? 2017.
Yes, yes.
Our
It
last
was still,
appearance.
yeah,
So it's been 5 years, 6 years, 5, 6 years since we've been in playoffs. No, yeah, no. I
yeah,
would say it has to be a playoff berth. A successful season has to be a playoff berth, and you have the experience with the coach. I mean, regardless, you're either going to have to bring in a new veteran or a young quarterback, or
yeah,
who knows,
yeah,
under certain circumstances, corrals the guy. But
yeah,
you need to have you have to win this year. Tom Brady retired,
yeah,
and the other Saints and Atlanta are in shambles right now,
yeah,
with positions and quarterbacks.
yeah,
It's your year to take it. It's been, I don't know, a couple years now where like it's like, oh, like maybe we could take it over, but Brady's been being Brady, and but I mean that you gotta it's time to take over now. It's time to take
yeah.
over the South.
So I'm
So I
gonna
would say playoff berth.
I'm gonna put my stamp on not just the playoff berth. We got to win the division. Steve Wilkes was one game away from winning the division, one game because we can't obviously can't tell the future if we still win the Saints game if we win the Tampa game, but I think you got to win the division. I think like out of the gates, like I don't think you can just settle for wild card playoff game on the road. I think you gotta. I think Frank Reich to put his mark on this team has to host a playoff game at the bank next year. I think that's it. I think that's that. Otherwise, if it's anything less than that, the fans are going to be like, "Well, we should have kept Steve Wilkes. Like, what is this guy doing?"
Right.
I honestly think that in order to get the buy-in of the masses, he's going to have to win the division. And I hate to say that to a first-year coach with a team, but again, I can't discount his veteran presence. He's a veteran head coach. Now he has to go down there and prove his mettle because at this point, you got people like me and you kind of backing him. Like, there's other fans out there and I listen to podcasts, they're backing him, man. And I don't think I don't think he can get out of this without winning a division title year one because I think it would be a little bit of a blowback. I mean, obviously, I don't foresee him having the bottom fall out and them going one win next year. I definitely see that the only option, the only road to the fans getting behind him is a division title. You have to host a playoff game at the bank, and you can't just host it. You got to look competitive. So that's where I'm at on this.
We gotta
So
win that.
yeah, man, like you got to, you have to. Well, heading to the end of the show, and I should have talked about this at the beginning. We're gonna do a couple Super Bowl picks because this is Super Bowl week, and I can't be closed minded. There's two teams still playing, although I'd rather have a horse in the race. We don't, but it looks like it's gonna be a pretty cool matchup. It looks like the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles are gonna lock horns here in a couple days in Arizona. So what are you thinking about this game, D?
I mean, I love it. I know. I mean, you got Jalen Hurts, who has really stamped his name to possibly being. He's coming for. He's been playing for respect this year and acknowledgement.
FYI, off season last year, they were saying that if Jalen didn't have a solid season, the Eagles should probably be looking for another quarterback. Like that was a real
Absolutely.
conversation.
Oh yeah,
So
no, that really did that bothered me because I don't think he's been treated fair since being in the league from that standpoint. I think
yeah,
his first season last year, he took them to playoffs with not a really great roster, and you went toe to toe with a Tom Brady Buccaneers team that almost went to the Super Bowl themselves. So, and then you follow that up with a 14-3 year, um, and you got AJ Brown. So, and then at the other end, I mean, Pat Mahomes is going to be Pat Mahomes. It looks like in 5 years, he's made it to five conference championship games and one
he's
Super Bowl win. So his efficiency in the league is just
a
it's
cheat code.
ridiculous right
He's a
now.
cheat code. He's
Yeah.
an absolute cheat code. It's not even fair. So how about it's a Kelsey Bowl too, man? First time you have brothers playing against each other. You got
Hmm.
Travis and Jason Kelsey.
Yep.
So I mean, just all kinds of things happening. Like, I mean, it should be a fun game. I mean, like I said, I'm no horse in the race. I'm trying to muster all my excitement, knowing that I'm a salty Panthers fan sitting here on the sideline waiting for everything to be over so we can get to the matters of combine in the offseason. But I mean, the
Absolutely.
Eagles defense is scary. I'll be honest with you. Hassan Reddick has been uber efficient. I mean, he's got 3.5 sacks in the playoffs alone. So I mean, he had 13 on the year. So the man is like just racking them up right now. So it's like it's scary. I don't know. The Chiefs defense isn't as efficient, but I mean they can get after you, man. They still can. So
Hmm.
I mean, basic breakdown. I guess we're to pick time, man, because we're hitting about 45 minutes. We're at pick time. You want to go first? You want me to go first?
Uh, I'll go first.
All right.
So building off real quick, building off what you were saying, I believe they have Eagles have 4 or 5 guys that have over 10 plus sacks this
The
year.
entire starting defensive line are double digit sacks. That's gross.
Just keep that in mind. So
It's gross.
I don't think the Chiefs have played a team like this where they can really get after Pat Mahomes, and he could be on this he could be on the run a lot, and that ankle has been really questionable since
Yeah.
the playoff game against the Jags. So definitely
Yeah.
be on the lookout for you guys watching that. Also, yeah, I don't know. I like the AJ Brown, Devontae, the two Batman combo, the duo, and
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts, and just his running style. And I would just love to see that kind of be brought to light,
Yeah.
for a lack of better terms, because
Yeah.
I think running quarterbacks have really been like kind of talked down to and not really respected, as those can't win Super Bowls. And
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts isn't a Lamar Jackson, but he can run with a lot of those guys, and yeah, he'll be probably one of the first. So I got the Eagles. I mean, winning this.
All right. So you got the Eagles. So in the same light, that Eagles defense hasn't. I mean, I'm sorry. The Kansas City offense hasn't played a defense like the Eagles defense, and I am 100% buying into that. Like I really do believe that's a thing. Here's what I'll tell you. As I understand it, there are no holdovers from that last Eagles Super Bowl team. So this team doesn't know what it's like there this week. And I'll give them that. Ndamukong Suh, he's on his third Super Bowl team somehow. He's got the Robert Ory effect. He's like, just he can pick the right team in the offseason. And I'm just telling you, that Eagles defense, like you said, the Kansas City Chiefs haven't seen a defense like the Eagles, but the Eagles defense hasn't seen haven't they their path has not been to play like playoff Pat, right? Like I compare playoff Pat to Sunday Tiger to playoff Jordan. Like playoff
Kirk
Pat's
Cousins at one
different.
o'clock.
Oh my God, stop. Don't you even bring Kurt into this conversation. Ain't nobody like Kirk Cousins, but yeah, 1 o'clock Kurt. I
One
mean,
o'clock, Kirk.
gross. I just think Pat Mahomes is going to hit a different place, man. He's got too many weapons. Kelsey. I can see the Eagles really having a package, to kind of, to keep Kelsey out. But something tells me playoff Pat's gonna rear his ugly head, and I'm gonna give this one to the Chiefs, man. I'm going outside the lines on this one, but I feel that playoff Pat's gonna rear his ugly head, and he's been there. He knows what it's like to win the big game, and he's got his dude, man. Kelsey, even if people focus on Kelsey, and Kelsey still balls. So I'm not until I see it happen. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna rock with playoff Pat and the Kansas City Chiefs on this one. So
All right, all right.
all
I
right,
like it.
all
I
right.
see where you're coming from.
All right. Well, we've hit the end of the show. It's been a great conversation. Somehow we hit the 50-minute mark, and we've been trying to keep this thing to 30 minutes. But with one show this week, I guess we'll let this thing fly at 50 minutes. So we've been working hard to be your trusted source for all things Carolina Panthers. So please like and comment on this video because we enjoy doing this. We want to produce
Right now.
content. Yeah, please like it right now. We want to produce content for very passionate Carolina Panther fans. We like that. We really think that we come from the fans' perspective, and we are thinking the things that you're thinking, and we have enough experience with the team and in football in general that we can give some perspective that not everybody can give. So, also, please, in order to make sure you're alerted when we post new content, subscribe. subscribe, and hit the bell notification,
Hit the
because
bell.
all this helps the algorithm and make sure that you and other Panther fans see Panther Pedigree content when you search Carolina Panthers. So we are asking you to make sure that you're doing that for us, because again, we enjoy doing this. This is a labor of love for us. We just enjoy doing this, and it's a great conversation. This is about our team, and we got some great ideas for episodes coming up. So thank you for tuning in. Can't wait to talk to you guys again next week after the Super Bowl, and we can talk trash about who ended up picking the right team and so on and so forth. But next week we get to open combine season. We get to start talking about some of these players coming out, and our draft episode is going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be one of the best on the internet. So please get ready for our draft episode. So you got any closing comments, sir?
Drop down in the comments who you guys got winning the Super Bowl.
Yes,
And
definitely. Put your Super Bowl winner in the comments. Thank you, Dakari. That is so good. Yes,
um
definitely.
and yeah, keep pounding. That's it for me.
Keep pounding. All right, I'm going to get us out of here with a little bit of Panther Pedigree audio.
Let's do it.
So I'm thankful. I'm very thankful that this is a thing. This is, again, a labor of love. We enjoy doing this. We can't wait to do the next episode, and we're going to be here all off season doing this and bringing you content, fresh content. Love that Panther in the background. I'll tell you that right now. All right.
Tough.
Be good. Stay safe. Keep pounding.